Cool. Okay, so something I'm learning lately, with my day off, it's a really weird thing. They just happen to give me a day off, so I'm waking up thinking about, very inspired and just kind of like looking at things under an amazing amazing view that I think is something that I think new ministers don't know, and I think these people, they don't really know, and so they don't really understand how to. They can be confident from what their little views are because they're new. They don't really see the big picture. They may see some things, and I'm sure there's something to it, and the Lord could use all that, and I'm very grateful for that. But in my earlier days, I never really took into consideration that there is a lot of dirty work that needs to be done in the churches, not just to rebuke everybody for not doing it. You know, I think that just like David Wilkerson's church was built upon, it was built a lot around um, homeless people. People that was really not homeless, but people who really, the more lesser income areas that really did need a little bit of help. And he had a whole grocery or truck full of or he had a whole large vehicle full of a bunch of grapefruits, and then he was finding out perishable food. How do I get rid of these perishable foods and get them to someone who's actually going to be able to use them? And so he went to lesser income areas and started giving them out, and they knew someone else who could use a box, and on and on and on. And how did they know that that was going to build their church? Because there's an element among it that just makes it work. Okay. Now the other element I wanted to talk about before I even got into the church building, because that's a whole bunch of things as well, of things that actually works. And I'm not trying to say let's slip into pragmatism, but I am trying to say at least take your holy vision and take a look at this as well, to see if they can't match, to see if you cannot see how they need each other. Because I do understand that there's a difference between a single person who has a lot of freedoms, because there's a lot less elements in his life or her life to make complicated all the challenges that come with connecting with other people. Like in my job, when all the drivers did their own work, they didn't have to do any kind of extra. They didn't have anybody else to help them with their work. It's like as soon as we added help, it added way more problems, way more drama. All the people were fighting over who should be helping them and stuff like that. Never was an element before, but now it is. And so it took a long time for us to learn how to take the help, to receive the help, because we couldn't receive it because it just caused us to. We want to receive our help in this kind of a way, and it was. Even though we all tried to be nice, it still was like it caused us to. It changed our lives, and when your lives are changing, and you don't know all the elements to your life being changed, it's very, very difficult to handle it, and it caused way more fights. Adding help, and it cost the company more money to cause more fights. That's what it really was. Until everybody learned how is this going to really work, because there's so many elements to it. And that's why I put this screen up here, just to take a look at this thing, to just throw out another subject so I can start completing these subjects, hopefully. I wanted to see the elements on here. Chemical evolution, so all the chemicals in the world. The origin of higher elements from hydrogen. So whatever that means, I don't know what that means, but I understand that there are 92 elements of something, like with the beryllium and hydrogen and nitrogen, and there's 92 of these all together on this whole chart, which I'm sure is a scientific fact. I don't know anything about that and being disproved. I believe it's right. But what my point is the same thing. Imagine there's 92 or 70 or some large number of elements when it came to people communication, when it came to delivering the gospel, when it came to building a business. There's elements of so many sorts. There's always going to be a word against us. There's always going to be a vision that's going to want to go soaring through. And there's going to be many different challenges. You're going to have to find out, do I have the capacity to navigate through all these elements that are pro and con what we're trying to do? And the truth is that we don't know. And so when we don't really know everything, we're not really wise about all the different elements of connecting with people, how they perceive things. How can I act like myself? How can we keep things natural, but yet not leave someone in distress? Because I think that happens a lot of times in churches. One of the things that I think I hear people saying is that people don't like to feel judged. And the person up there is just, I just want to tell the truth, and boom, boom, boom. And I was like, well, if everybody just takes their place and does their job, it should be easy for sinners to come into churches that are very holy, feel very kindly welcomed, and yet not feel judged in the wrong kind of a way. There is a difference between a holy conviction and a holy awe of God knocking on their door, where it is between them and God, versus people looking at them in a funny way of, oh, you're not dressed right, or you still so preoccupied with things that we hate and we've learned years ago that's not how you do it. Well, you haven't learned how to win souls, so you might want to just take it easy and start to learn and be wise and know that you don't know all the 92 elements of spiritual reality, 92 elements of people skills, the makeup of human beings and different types of personalities and how are they perceiving things. This is a lot of wisdom that love just dominates. So when people are purposely going to bank everything on love, it's, there's truth that needs to come about, but there's a timeliness as well. And so as you get wiser and as you get older, you start to balance these things out in such a way that you're not going to be harsh. You're going to be like Jesus. I mean, anybody can imagine what Jesus would be like if he was to show up on the scene. But I, for one, could not imagine in a second that the Lord would be anything but right. The only time he ever got really sharp with people was when they were carrying on something so sacred that it was pushing God past his comfort zone, okay? So as a leader in the church, he needs to be able to learn how to navigate through the 92 elements of the heart of God. He needs to learn how to navigate through the 92 elements of the congregation at all different levels. Maybe there's 92 for each. It's a lot to think about. So my point is that when you realize you really just don't know, I mean, you could think you know, well, like, you just need to straighten up. I just want to see this change happen in your life, okay? I think the Lord is trying to relieve us from those things, or to be very careful as we bring those wonderful, epic truths to the people, that they're probably true. But it doesn't mean that you just say it sometimes, because they could be hanging on by a thread, barely even work themselves up to get there, and then you try to bring them into the high responsibilities before they're really ready. That's bad leadership. Okay, that's not wise to the 92 elements of dealing with critical people situations. You don't see someone who's they got maybe part of their body got blown off in a war. They bring them into the thing and they started doing the exact same thing they did to someone else who had just a toe problem. It's like you can't handle every situation the same, because they're not the same. You need to be wise about the 92 elements of everything. And if you are realizing that's a lot to know, how can I possibly know that? Very good. You don't know. So be kind and careful and patient, and let the Lord make it clear as time goes by. Everybody needs to be patient. Everybody needs to be loving, and everybody has to have the attitude of don't throw anybody away. Nobody's worthy of being thrown away just because they don't smell right, they don't look right, they're offensive to my 5 senses, they're offensive to my 5 cardinal doctrines of the church, they're offensive to... We've got to learn how to... There are some things that are just pretty no-brainer, I mean, it seems like the secular world and the Christian world, they both believe it's not right to cheat, because that's one of those things that just is, there's kind of no-brainers that most of people in the natural world know what lines not to cross. It's pretty obvious. So, yeah, the same reason I don't know the 92 elements of chemical evolution or chemical whatever. Where did they come from? I don't know where they came from. God He knew all the things that needed to be. And pastors, because you get one thing right doesn't mean that you've got everything right. Just because you've got one whole, doctrine and theology and patience and kindness and all that different giftings and all the different whatever. There's so many different views, and someone gets on a track and they really just sit there, I know what I'm talking about. Now, that confidence is very, very comforting to people, and that attracts people, but that doesn't mean that you really do know all there is to know. And the fact that you don't is a good place to just be confident, confident in your lack of confidence, but confident in Him to know that God will be timely when He needs to be. You never see anyone in the history of the church walking in the great things of God always at their own command. They're always in total need of God making it plain, and they all had to wait thinking, well, goodness, did God totally leave me? Or what's going on now, And so having all these things together, we realize that we just don't know. We don't have the right to be rushing things. We don't have to rush God, and we don't have to rush people. We don't have to rush God's work in our own life. We just need to be faithful to the Lord as He has taught us to. If there's things from our past that He keeps bringing up, consider dealing with them the way He feels like dealing with it, and that'll humble you enough. Don't just to know that we don't do. If a minister doesn't do everything he's supposed to do, I've heard someone say that. Oh, I just had to apologize for that again, and I'm like, maybe He wants you to deal with it, And I think that as we take all the cheap cards, I've seen this happen a lot of immature ministers. They take all the cheap cards for themselves, and then they deliver the harsh cards for everybody else, so they can be just like them. Okay, now that starts to sound like you're building the twofold son of hell twice as bad as yourself, because you yourself aren't obeying the Holy Spirit, but yet you're trying to force everybody to be like you as you so-called in some way follow God in your own way. Or like the Bible talks about people who raise themselves up to be apostles of Christ. Okay, and if God's not, they're ministers of Satan, but they've raised themselves up to be apostles of Christ, and they go everybody else sternly, this is how we raise you up to be an apostle of Christ. You've raised them, you go to the farthest land and makes a proselyte that's going to be ended up being the twofold son of hell twice as bad as you, because they don't have a rock on the one who has an understanding of all the different elements of all the elements. He knows all the different categories, and He knows all the 92 elements about all of the things, and He has ultimate wisdom about everything because He spoke it into existence. When the King of Glory said it like this, let there be light, let there be a firmament, let there be land, let there be animals, let there be oceans, let there be land before the waters, let there be man, and breathe in his nostrils and make him a living soul. Let Him create the foundations of the earth and humble everyone who thinks they know. That's what He did to Job. He had 86 elements of questions of where do you think you were? Where do you think you're so smart? You got down what you know right now, but you don't know anything. Let me just prove to you how little you really do know. And he was a perfect man because he always did right, and he had an attitude of I'm ready to learn more, and he proved it. No matter how hard it got, he stayed in his integrity, and God blessed him. He wasn't in trouble. He was just being stretched. Okay, there's a difference between being rebuked and being stretched, and I've seen that happen. And I feel like I better have a warning about a recent testimony. I don't think it's time to bring it up right now. But one of the things I wanted to bring up and kind of like break down one of the communication barriers or the communication elements of people in group situations. Whenever you're working together on your job, you're working together in ministry, you're working together in your homes. I had my own bottom end experience where I'm the one in distress. And I had a message that all I wanted to let these people know is like a tiny little change could go a long way with me. Okay? Minor changes could be a lot of relief for me because I am not okay. Everybody has to bite their tongue once in a while here and there and like, okay, that's annoying. And you have your limits. And as soon as someone crosses the line where they pushed you way past your limit, you're like, I'm not okay right now. Because what's going on is pushing me past my mode into distress. Okay, nobody should be like that in church. And if reality happens, and they actually start to feel that kind of a distress, then they ought to have some type of a distress signal, okay? And if there is no type of an understanding of a distress signal, we're not allowing a reparation for those types of issues and the elements of the church growing together. Because if the church is going to be under attack, most wise ministers know that most of the attack happens among the team. And so we have to be, first of all, they're subtle, because the devil is subtle. He plays on the three chords he always does, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Those are the three chords. And plus he also deals heavily with, what's the other one? He deals with the different, he tries to put people in distress in such a way that the people communications aren't able to happen. Okay, well, I forgot what I was going to say just then. Hopefully I'll come back to it. But you get what I'm saying. Like, I felt the bottom end of this thing. All I wanted to say is, look, folks, there was 3 things that went on that threw me past my level, and everybody else didn't even know it was a problem. But I was suffering, okay? And that suffering matters, okay? Anyone who feels like that that's not okay that they ever have to feel like that in God's house, okay? dealing deeply with the Lord's Holy Spirit convicting you, God knows how to do it in the right way because he knows all that stuff. And he has the wisdom how to handle that stuff. And nobody on this earth does. I don't care how wise you are, you don't know. Wherever God wants to take the church far, 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 trust me, no minister alive right now knows all that stuff. And they could be wiser than a lot of other ministers, but that doesn't mean that they really know how to handle all the details because they're just not seasoned to realize that they just don't know. Just knowing that you don't know is wise. That you don't have to know everything to be noticed as wise, because you want to be right in God's sight, in his timing, in his ways, not in what you think people who are heroizing you want to see. That means your rock has just shifted. I want to live for your pleasure, Lord. In this one I don't know, so I'm going to be careful to step in there and bring any hard advice or strong dealings or anything like that. I'm going to be very careful to handle this thing and let you make it plain as we wait upon you, as we're dealing with real issues in the church. But I know what it felt like to want to say, hey, I'm not okay. I want to talk to you, you, and you. These are things that you guys are all putting pressure on me when I'm trying to lead, okay? And it's not, there's so much more we can do when body of Christ, when leaders will work together. If they can figure out how to develop what I call it lifelines. I said, after all, I brought it up. Okay, here's the thing. Trying to bring it up was brutal. Okay, just trying to bring this thinking thing up is so hard because you know it's going to be stepping on toes. Because anytime you want to bring anybody just even a tiny correction in this very self-centered church of America, no one can hear correction, and it's just not fun. It's just difficult no matter what generation you live in. People are people that don't want to be corrected. I brought a little bit of love in the air, and like I thought, because of the sarcastic zone that we were all in, and letting them know something ain't right. I'm in distress. I'm sending a distress signal. But they were not ready to change gears, and so they were not receiving it. And I said, it took me everything just to want to even go there, and now you're going to joke with me. Now things are going to get very, very dangerous now. And so I got very loud and made it clear that this is past the okay zone, okay? But just because people don't feel comfortable to say, look, I'm being serious, something ain't right, and we've got to settle the score now. Okay? No one should ever have to feel like that in church. We should all be wise enough to be able to flow together. But if life happens and things do go wrong, there ought to be some type of an understanding in your little community, in your little circle, to know what a distress signal looks like. When someone says, I don't want to have to bring this up, okay? But I do have things on my heart, and I need to bring it up. It's like everybody needs to go, okay, let's get to go. Let's go to the private room, and whoever, who do you want to come in here? Boom, boom, boom. Let's us together. We're gonna talk it out. Hear what's on your mind. Write 3 things down or whatever, and then they can bring it up and ask it out and say. But anybody who's bringing it up, okay, they are the king for the moment. They really need to be heard and understood and respected, and to know that even if it's brought up once, it might need to be brought up again, or things might come to their mind later on. Just to give them that freedom could take a while for what they are really dealing with to be able to get settled. Now, a minister needs to know how hard that can be, and to let the patients rule. Because if in that atmosphere, they've got their dignity, they don't want to have to cry, they don't want to have to get mean, they don't want to have to make it uglier than it needs to be. So there's going to be elements of humor in the midst of it to make it, we can relax while we're talking about it, and no one has to feel dumb like they got their finger pointed at them because someone was hurt and they wanted. There's a dynamic in bringing things up too. So the person in distress has to have wisdom as to not just trash everybody as well. Well, I'm feeling trashed. Well, I'm going to trash everybody to make sure they know not to trash me again. That's also a lack of wisdom. We need to develop lifelines, okay? So it just so happened that after that time I had problems on my job with the bosses and people that I work with, and things got really just way over the top because everybody was getting hit in places that they just don't normally get hit at. So I just said, look, I'm wrong. The spirit that we're feeling right now is not right. We need to develop a lifeline. How do you communicate? How do you hear? How do you receive? And things like that. I care about those things. And I'm not here to be better than you and to force you into my view. I don't want to work with people that are forced to be what I want them to be. I want them to be themselves. Just like God doesn't make us robots, and we don't want to make anybody religious robots either, because if we do, we're missing the point. Okay, they ought not do it because they fear you, in a sense. And sometimes there's a point for that too, of fearing godly leadership because you know that they are, but that still needs to be holy. Okay, but I don't want them to be. I'm not going to do this because Robbie doesn't like this or whatever. I want them to just see it and go, that does make sense. I'm going to step in it because I believe it is right for me. And there's a way to bring correction where you're not overstepping your bounds and stuff like that. So that is something I think is really, really important for churches to know. Churches that have a problem growing, it's not in strategies, it's in our hearts. It's in our own hearts, okay? When our hearts are ready to be in tune with God and be caring and compassionate and loving to all, there's a lot of room for growth in the church, okay? And just because you want that doesn't mean that's a reality. You might not have the character or the stamina, and God might bring one little test through your door to show you how not ready you really are. So you can go like, wow, Lord, I can't be trusted with anything. You know, I thought I could conquer the world because I had this little slogan throughout your all vast knowing, and I thought I really knew it. And God's like, you didn't really know it. You don't know everything else connected. Everything else is connected. So you have to have a very vast wisdom. And since we can't know all that stuff, and even if you studied it, you still don't know it because your character is not capable. That means we're always going to be dependent on God, the Holy Spirit. Okay, we all have to be constantly to be taking our places in whatever the Lord has placed us in. You're the leader. Okay, you're the one who's going to be the final factor, but at the same time compassionate enough to deal with all these elements of the many different categories. So we think about it that way. It's going to humble the leader to facilitate properly. Okay. Now, I've seen when I'm recording the church service, I've seen someone on the camera because I didn't turn the camera off quick enough, and I could see something through that camera of what happens after the church service in a way that I don't normally see while I'm actually there. You know, it caused me to see like a fly on the wall, and the discomfort of other people who maybe aren't leaders, or they're not the bold types or something. They're not the loud talks, so they don't just feel comfortable everywhere. They're the kind of people who leave quickly because they don't feel comfortable, and it's because there's no one talking to them. They can't just do what I do because they're not wired like me. They for some reason they don't feel the same comfort that I feel. So I don't care if I'm talking to someone or not. I can do whatever and find something to do. There's a lot for me to do to make myself feel comfortable for hours. Some people can't feel comfortable for 1 minute because they're not the same person. And the same person, there's a place where everybody feels comfortable. That's where they go. So is there going to be a church where everybody can feel comfortable and they can grow on their own terms and page? I think so. That's why I think mega churches are so good, because they're so comfortable for anybody to go to. You could get lost in the crowd and never have anybody bug you, but yet there's still things being taught to them that could help them in their genuine walk with God. So there is a place for mega churches, and they are not like small churches. There's the elements are so radically different, but yet people can still flood in and flood out, flood in and flood out. People flood in because it's easy to go to. People flood out because they're trying to compare it to a different style of church that it's not even trying to be. It isn't a church. It's a mega church. It's a megaplex. And it's like going into a mall and you got thousands of things to look at. All these people, and they're all worshiping. This feels like we're all in one big symmetry. And in some ways it is. But the thing is it's not like a regular style church. It's just so huge. And the element of even small mega churches, it's the same thing. They still have that same atmosphere. It's just so comfortable. Anybody can go. Anybody would be welcome there. Anybody would be understood. And anybody would be fine there. And so you'd have to recognize, if you do recognize all the elements, I believe God would plant a lot of mega churches in order to make people comfortable coming indoors that they never in a billion years would ever want to come to. So I think people need to be careful to, act like you know everything about all the different categories and all the elements, all the 92 elements or whatever, high amount of elements in every category. We don't know. So we ought to be slow to speak and quick to listen, and to wait upon the Lord to make sure that we're not just being confident about a 1% of all there is to know. This is what I know about this. Well, you've just excluded a lot of people that God's not excluding. So probably you're not really that wise in God and not going to be trusted with very much at all. So those are some of the thoughts I have today. I think the element thing is a really good word. I need to study that out and find out if I can figure out what that really means. But for that, that's good for now. I think that's good.